Hi, everybody. Welcome to Monday. And you'll notice there's more stuff this time around because we're talking the new Masters of the Universe Netflix show. And there has been so much shit flown around about this friggin' cartoon that I feel the need to prove my cred so that people don't just go, yeah, 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 and they're going to do it anyway, but at least when they do it this time, they look really frigging stupid because you cannot outfan me on He-Man. You will notice we have, I don't know if you can see it back here, but you got Battle Armor He-Man and Battle Cat, you got Battle Armor Skeletor and Panther, and you got Duncan, aka Man-at-Arms, in the slime pit, and then you got Sorceress here. Sorceress doesn't stand up. I'll pull Sorceress here because I'm going to show you that the Sorceress did not have the thickness of Evelyn and Tila in the thighs, so she doesn't stand up very well. She's also got the wings, so she falls over. But we have Orko here as well. Orko, he was one of the people that liked Orko in the 80s. I was in the minority. And Roboto, and we've got Stinkor on the Bashosaurus. Great name. We got Mossman and Strider here. I thought this toy was so cool. I mean, the legs didn't bend, but it's cool looking, right? And like straight up reproduced in the show. We've got Merman on the Land Shark. The Land Shark. This is a cool toy too, huh? Look at this thing. That was freaking badass in the 80s. And then we got over here, I put Triclops on the... What the fuck is that thing called? The something rod? The Road Ripper. The Road Ripper. Yeah, it's green. So I put him on green. Here's like Triclops. And then you got Beastman on Rotor and Trapjaw in front of it. And then the Dragon Walker with Fakor. I think Fakor had the most meaningful, like, makeover in the new show. But, you know, I'm doing this again to prove my fandom. A Dragon Blaster Skeletor, Thunder Punch He-Man. This actually had caps. You put on the inside caps. Yeah, we actually played with minor explosives in the 80s. Got Classic Skeletor, got Evelyn. Did you remember Evelyn was jaundiced yellow? You probably did not remember that Evelyn was jaundiced yellow back in the day. Tila, you probably might not remember Tila's weird snake thing. I don't know, like, that's a cuirass / I don't know. But, yeah, there were a lot of inconsistencies between the toys and the cartoons back in the day. Duncan had no mustache on the toys. He did in the cartoon. Evelyn wasn't yellow like that the same way in the cartoon. And Tila didn't have this snake thing. That'll become relevant in a bit. But I don't, and King Randor wore no pants. But I don't just have the He-Man toys like Prince Adam here. Yes, that was Prince Adam in the 80s. Because a 16-year-old kid looked like this. Yeah. Anyway, I have a He-Man coin bank. And I have a He-Man bubble bath container. And I have the He-Man book with Stinkor. I love Stinkor. I love Stinkor a lot. And I got some comics over there. This is the absolute dumbest thing I own. And I think it's just it's an embodiment of the sweetness of the era, but also the shameless commercialism of Masters of the Universe. And it's a toothpaste topper, and there's He-Man and Skeletor working together to make brushing fun, because mortal enemies do that, right? But I mean, that sort of gives you a snapshot of people didn't take things nearly as seriously in the 80s. Now, before you insist, but, because everybody's looking for a reason to reject what I have to say for reasons that baffle me, I do have some of the Four Horsemen stuff as well. I think this was the utterly coolest thing the Four Horsemen put out. But you notice they don't balance well. These toys are not easy to play with, okay? These I would claim are plastic and rubber statues. as opposed to the original toys. But look how cool that is. That's friggin' badass, man. Like, that's Beelzebub approved, right? But you're talking about a toy meant to be played with, right? And something that kind of stands there and looks cool. And this is where we get into the divide, right? Does He-Man does Skeletor in your memory look like this? Or does he look like this, right? Obviously, one's like a lot more intimidating and less kid-friendly. You can recognize Skeletor, but there are obviously differences, right? And then, is He-Man in your memory? We'll pull Thunder Punch here. Although Battle Armor He-Man is the freaking coolest Battle Armor He-Man. But does He-Man look like this in your nostalgia-driven memory? Or does he look like this? Like, obviously, these are not the same memories, right? And that's where we get into some of, I think, the controversy surrounding this Netflix series. But I want to show you one more thing. Just again, cred. Do not try to outfan me. I never flex. I'm flexing here. This is one of the more delicate things. This is a Scareglow. He's in a black cloth because I've managed to keep the orange on him to a minimum. This thing glows in the dark, but they use kind of cheap stuff. And so when he's exposed to sunlight, he can turn orange. So he's kept him and my Thundercats Palmyra figure are kept out of the sunlight because I'm trying to preserve them. That's how hardcore I am. I was back on the He-Man forums back in the day. I am super fan. Okay? I even have the two... If you're wondering what the thing with the two parts of the sword was in the show, this is the original He-Man sword. This is the original Skeletor sword. On the back of them, He-Man has a little nub on it. Skeletor has a little groove on it. You stick them together, it forms one sword. This was cool in the 80s. Looking back on it, it's like, wow, we were just a couple of steps above rocks and sticks, when this was like, whoa, awesome. But then again, we have, the toy that could burn your finger. So the 80s were a unique time in human history. The 80s were this mix of Cold War anxiety and economic boom exuberance, right? And so He-Man is such a beautiful example of that. Now, it makes adaptations incredibly difficult because adult fans who grew up with this stuff like I did don't want, to be reminded of the fact that it was a crass consumerism behemoth that were cheap cartoons, like shoestring budget, cheap cartoons. I went to a Comic-Con talk where Lou Scheimer talked about how cheap those cartoons were. But, we want to, like, oh my God, his gears move. Come on, that's cool. That's what we want to remember. We don't want to remember the shameless consumerism, the fact that He-Man was the show that went from like educational after school children's stuff to Saturday morning block advert extravaganza, right? And because the show was so cheap, you get inconsistencies like this that, again, I'm laying the groundwork here because I think this gets into some of the controversy surrounding the shows, and it is relevant to, why I liked it and why I'm going to give it a positive review with some caveats. Here's Teela from the cartoon, right? Now, obviously, there are differences, right? Teela from the cartoon doesn't have this weird snake harness cuirass thing. She doesn't have the snake staff. This whole thing was thrown together so hastily and so cheaply, one division was not talking to the other division, but even without the snake thing, her collar is not as wide. She doesn't have the pop collar the same way. The whirls on her, we'll say bodice, are not as pronounced on the toy. This looks a lot like Teela's outfit at the beginning of Masters of the Masters of the Universe Netflix cartoon. This does. A lot of people remember this. And we get into this fight of which is right. The toy, is this the default Teela look? Or the show? And the truth is, there's really no right answer. Both came out at the same time. Both are canon, so to speak. And so what I'm going to do from here on in is I'm going to give you a brief why I liked it, broad strokes, what my recommendations are. Then I'm going to talk about the controversy. Then after that, I'll get to a spoiler deep dive. Okay? I want people to be able to watch the rest of it if, they haven't been spoiled. Bless you. I don't know how that's possible. I was actually spoiled before I watched it, and I think it actually improved my enjoyment of it, to be completely honest. But, so that's what we're going to do. Short version, I really enjoyed it. As, again, a longtime fan and a hardcore fan. You cannot come back at me and go, yeah, but you're not really a fan, or real fans don't like it, which I spent the whole weekend getting. I was told I hate men. I was told I'm a liar. I was told I'm a completely different person when I'm not talking about video games. And I actually asked some people, does that make sense to you? Is that Occam's razor? Is that the simplest solution and therefore most likely the correct one? Or do we just have a difference of opinion on this thing? And it ain't that deep. This is the problem with creating a show with the stated intent of being the He-Man show in your nostalgic memory, not the He-Man show that actually was. And I am one of those people. For me, He-Man is this, and He-Man is this. Okay? He-Man isn't this in my mind. He-Man is more Stinkor and Merman and Trapjaw and Mossman and Beastman, the freak show, right? This is Masters of the Universe to me. I am a Masters of the Universe nostalgia fan, not a He-Man fan. He-Man was actually one of my least favorite characters, which is why I didn't immediately have a base He-Man to pull. I liked the weirdos, right? This is what made the show magical and amazing and cool for me, is the imagination in these supporting character designs. Oh, Merman's little harness has come off. The vehicle designs were amazing. And then, Battle Armor He-Man and Battle Armor Skeletor came out, and I was like, what? Badass. But that's because you could punch it and it actually make damage. Suddenly, okay, He-Man is relevant to my interests. But it's the supporting characters of Masters of the Universe that made Masters of the Universe for me. And Skeletor, not gonna lie. I was a Teela fan. I mean, if you're a redheaded little girl in the 80s, of course, Teela's going to be awesome, especially if you're what was then a tomboy. It was really cool. In my mind, Teela was not the pretty girlfriend. Teela was the tough chick who wore snake shit and was, did boy things and fought with the boys and trained with the boys and was equal to the boys. And she was He-Man's best friend, which I could relate to, right? And then, Evelyn was yellow. I mean, Evelyn was the one that got the most development in the 2002 series. The 2002 series was the Skeletor show. And that's what I didn't like about it. Even, fleshing out Evelyn's backstory, fleshing out Evelyn's character, that was pretty great in that show, right? But overall, I felt like it was too much the Skeletor show, not enough the Masters of the Universe show. And the Netflix show takes a completely different take. And for me to say there's too much Skeletor when I love Skeletor, freaking love Skeletor. Love Skeletor so much. I played Skeletor in like a Yahoo group RPG back in the day. I have told stories of my exploits as Skeletor. Because basically Skeletor was like a DM proxy, right? Because that creates the problem to solve, right? Story for another time. Hardcore. But this is my Masters of the Universe. And my Masters of the Universe is not the same as, say, a little boy who grew up worshiping He-Man, you know, or someone who liked the blonde punchy guy in fur shorts, and not, say, you know, the fact that there is everything awesome about riding a fucking battle cat. Like, oh my God, this ruined She-Ra for me forever. Why do I want another horse toy? It's a freaking cat that's so big you can ride it. Oh my God, that's amazing. And Cringer talking in the 80s cartoon, I loved. They made Cringer not talk in the 2002 cartoon, which a lot of people liked because it was more serious. But your cat has a helmet, dude, and it's green and yellow. How serious do you want to get? Well, the truth is, some people, very serious. Some people, in their heads, He-Man as this ultimate power fantasy. And I'm not saying it is a bad thing, okay? This is just what they remember. For me, it was silly, campy puns with, you know, a lot of terrible puns and that weird moralizing at the end because they wanted educational content, right? And the thing that made it so charming was the cheap to the point of whimsical quality of it. If I wanted a really gripping adventure, that was Thundercats. That was Voltron for me. That was even Transformers, right? He-Man was silly fun. And again, am I more right? As the other people more right? There's no right answer there. It's just different. And when you make a show about the Masters of the Universe people remember, instead of the Masters of the Universe it was, well, you're going to have some people that have very strong reactions feeling, yes, this is perfect. And then you're going to have people who feel very disappointed. I personally loved it. I actually had to give it a second look, like once I calmed down and stopped going Stinkor, Mossman, Trapjaw, Triclops, you know, just calling out every name and vehicle and the reimagined Fright Zone and the Slime Pit and all that stuff. Like, I actually had to get that out of my system and go back and go, okay, how is this as a story? It is a Masters of the Universe series of episode for grown-ups, in that it is excuses to throw as many different characters at the screen as possible through a series of admittedly kind of absurd adventures with terrible self-aware puns. There's also a deconstruction element to the concept of He-Man, why he's important to Eternia, why he is, you know, it's He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. The sort of the underpinnings of Castle Grayskull, a lot of stuff that was in story Bibles for the old show that never made it onto the screen, which for a nerd like me, that was friggin' awesome. But it does this by getting He-Man and Skeletor out of the way so that other characters get a turn. And that's been one of the more controversial elements of the show, is that sidelining of He-Man and Skeletor. Now, I think that was the only way to get any other character to get any sort of space in the story, because He-Man and Skeletor are both incredibly overpowered, you know, overpowered hero, overpowered villain, especially with Skeletor when he's like, silence, you fool! You know? He's a megalomaniac. He's a narcissist. He's not very good at winning, but nobody can get a word in edgewise around Skeletor. So in order to develop, the villains, though the lines blur, the lines were always blurred, you have to get Skeletor out of the way. In order to let the heroes do anything, you need to have He-Man not there. Now, in the old cartoons, there were entire episodes where He-Man did not appear. Prince Adam lost the sword and couldn't turn into He-Man. In a lot of episodes, He-Man doesn't show up until at least halfway through, right? Because they have to do by the power of Grayskull, the big transformation scene that they made. Very anime and kind of magical girl. And I admit, I needed a minute on that one. And there's going to be moments of this show where everybody who's a hardcore fan and feels very strongly needs a minute. Okay? I wasn't the biggest fan of the art style. I found it messy, especially in the second and third episodes. I found the animation quality kind of slumped in the second and third episodes. Like, wrists looked broken when they were sitting on people's hips, and just the line work was clunkier, and it just looked messier and less refined than episode 1, or certainly like the final 2 in the first half. But the art is for people who remember He-Man like this. The story is for people who remember He-Man like this. And that is, I think, where some of the very strong feelings come from, right? Now, you notice I said, what's out now? My recommendation is that you wait. If you haven't seen it yet, wait until they're all out. Because if you're not an obsessed fan like me, you're not going to catch everything they're doing. And you might end up very confused, very overwhelmed, and be like, where's He-Man? So wait if you haven't watched it. Or just be prepared to kind of be, what was that? At the end of 5 episodes. And that's where I think some of this controversy comes from. I think that if Netflix had released all 10 and people were able to watch the whole story, people would feel very differently. Because the first 5 end in the part of the He-Man cartoon where all seems dark right before Adam gets the sword and goes by the power of Grayskull and He-Man comes in to save the day, right? Darkest before the heroes win. So it's only half the story. And, that's not the whole thing. And for someone like me, who loves the secondary characters, that's awesome. I didn't miss He-Man at all, right? For people who love He-Man, right? I don't want to touch too much on the controversy because I want to get into more of the details of the cartoon, but people will scream at me if I don't. And I really don't know what to say because I find the whole thing incredibly overblown. I really don't understand why people are as angry as they are. And you know what? I don't want to. I kind of have a rule. When I decide I'm going to watch something, I get off the hype train. They've sold me. They don't need to sell me anymore. I don't want to set expectations so high that the show is never going to meet them. And I think that's what happened with a lot of people. But then there were the leaks, which, spoilers to follow here, but everything from this point forward is going to be spoilery. So the leaks were basically He-Man gets killed by Skeletor. It's the Teela show, or He-Man Sideline. It's the Teela show, and her girlfriend take over for He-Man. That is not what the story is. And that is an absurd idea. Masters of the Universe is produced by Mattel, the makers of the toy line, the makers of this crap. Look, the makers of the toy license. The reason There's Dragon Blaster Skeletor and Thunder Punch He-Man is when Walmart and other major chains like that come in and go, these are the toys we want. They say, we want He-Man and we want Skeletor, and what are these things? So they give them 2 or 3 He-Mans and Skeletor to sell them on the awesome Merman and Stinkor and so on. There's no way. There's no way. No way. They're going to get rid of He-Man. There's no way the license is too valuable. Teela being a lesbian, no. The extreme left is saying it's gay-coded. The extreme right is saying it's gay-coded. I would have no problem with it being gay-coded, but compared to back in the days where characters like Fisto and Ram Man had prominence, this Masters of the Universe is way less gay-coded than the original was. I'm sorry. Adam had a pink vest and no pants. Fisto. Ram Man. So what if it's gay-coded, even if it is? That is actually part of the DNA. And there is one, it's very brief, but there is one gay couple in it. I do not want to get into the personality politics of Kevin Smith. I have been a Kevin Smith fan for a really long time. I really like his stuff. I find some of the things he says on social media just flat out disgusting. Like, dude, overshare too much. I don't care if your wife's okay with it. Don't talk about your penis going into her parts. You know, like, just, the guy has no filter. He stand for Batman versus Superman. He has poor judgment when it comes to social media. But that is him. That was him before this. That will be him after this. The raw emotionality that is a part of who he is why he can make really good stuff that is the 8-year-old inside the 50-year-old that isn't just stupid and asinine, right? And I have been arguing with people about he lied. And I have a big thing with calling people liars unless you can prove it's a deliberate falsehood. And because it is a story about He-Man, the same way Dracula is about Dracula, even though Dracula's not the main character, and Moby Dick is about Moby Dick, even though Moby Dick isn't the main character, and the Wrath of Khan is about Khan, even though Kirk's the main character, though it's kind of about Kirk too, right? But the search for Spock's barely in it. Like, but it's showing, you know, Kirk and Khan's rivalry. Khan is a great villain. Yes, we learn a lot about Kirk, but, you know, Khan with the thing in Chekhov's ear and all that stuff, he like makes a lot out of very little screen time in that film. And so this whole thing about we were promised He-Man and He-Man's front and center on the posters. If you look at a lot of the advertising, especially overseas for Star Wars Episode 1, Darth Maul is front and center in the poster. We all know what happens to Darth Maul. Like, that is no guarantee that that's going to be the main character. The Far Cry games have the villain on the cover, not the playable character. Far Cry 3, Vaas on the cover. Vaas is written out mid-game. This is too rigid going in. This says to me that people's expectations were so detailed that there was no way a show was going to meet their expectations. Now, some people are not watching because of a dislike for Kevin Smith. That's totally fair. If you don't like the way the guy behaved, don't watch it. But that's not what I'm concerned about. I'm just concerned about whether people are making a persuasive case because there's larger things at play here. And Teela is not a lesbian. Andra is not her girlfriend. They do not usurp He-Man. Teela you get the very strong sense Tila is actually in love with Adam, and that's part of the reason she goes so heel turn on the whole thing. Like, I think the leather vest, like, boho Tila look is deliberately ugly, for lack of a better term. It is definitely an homage to this sort of this unmoving. I mean, look, it's the cuirass is the same shape without the snake thing. It's basically a throwback, but at the beginning of the show, she has long hair and she cuts her hair. I'm more confused by why Evelyn has muscles, and I'm willing to give it a chance because maybe there's more. But Tila actually has to take a punch in the gut in a few places. Evelyn does magic. And if you're talking about redesigns, I mean, Evelyn's totally redesigned. And you didn't see people freaking out about that, right? Faker's totally redesigned. Beastman has some changes. So what? They're recognizable as the characters. You know who they are. Tila having big arms makes sense. Again, in my nostalgia for Masters of the Universe. Now, I could talk the nuances all day, but people don't really care. It's been a half hour. You're either seething mad at me by now, ask yourself why, or you just want it to wrap the fuck up because I've already told you, if you haven't watched it, wait, but, here. My predictions for what happens next, based on the groundwork, is not that Tila is going to be the new He-Man. This is not Star Wars. This is not, one of the Marvel things. Tila, long back in continuity, is destined to be the new sorceress. He-Man is He-Man. Adam's not dead. He's just wounded. He's not dead. We never saw him die. There was no scarf. There was no big death scene. Tila's kind of, over him like that, but they don't see him die. He's not dead. Skeletor does his Night on Bald Mountain thing. No. That is the classic 80s thing of, if you go, you cannot come back, Adam, says, Dennis Haybert, Black God and everything. That's a joke, but kind of not a joke. He was Lucifer's dad and the exact same character as King Grayskull. Joke. But that is the 80s thing of pounding a rule into the sand only to break the rule at a big dramatic moment. Don't cross the streams in Ghostbusters. It is a straight up 80s trope that they are setting up so Adam can get the sword back somehow after him and Tila work out the tension between them because of the lies, because, okay, yeah, everybody lied to her, including her own parents, and she doesn't even know who one of those parents are yet. And they weren't super clear on that for people who don't know what's going on. It was an in-joke, and they stated, this is for pre-existing fans. All right, cool. Okay. But my big swing on predictions is that Sorceress and Duncan will die and end up in Pre-Eternia, because Sorceress needs to be out of the way for Tila to take the mantle of Sorceress, and they're setting up Andra hard to be the new Man-at-Arms. She does everything Man-at-Arms does. She was hooking up Roboto. She was doing all the stuff. She's the tech wizard. She's got the stuff. She's done the hand-to-hand thing, the at-arms part of Man-at-Arms. That is the swap that I see them telegraphing. The big wild card is what Evelyn's going to do. There's something going on with the Sorceress and Evelyn, but I mean, they seem to be going into Evelyn being like an abused girlfriend. They're sort of continuing that. They're keeping the cool Evelyn from 2002. But yeah, that's what I'm sticking a pin in. That's what I see. Now, I'm not saying I have any inside knowledge, but that makes more sense to me than Tila becoming He-Man. Because the Sorceress's look does not change if Tila becomes sorceress. She just gets a little thicker in the thighs, right? Which, but Skeletor's going to be Skeletor. He-Man's going to be He-Man. They're never going to make a show where Skeletor is stabbing a female character that violently. Never, ever, ever. And they want to give Skeletor menace. That was a stated thing. I'm not sure why people hung on certain things Kevin Smith said and completely ignored that one of the big things is to actually make Skeletor scary. That's why they did all that stuff. Not for some woke idea to get Prince Adam / He-Man out of the way. The only other thing I can see them doing is that Prince Adam finally becomes king of Eternia. That doesn't make as much sense to me as he continues to be He-Man. Tila becomes sorceress. Andra becomes the new Man-at-Arms, because then you've got a prominent black person in the action figure line. That's my call. And let's face it, who's the character most like Joel in He-Man? Joel from The Last of Us. Duncan. That's my theory. That's my prediction. I fully expect to be wrong, but that's what I got from it. But like I said, it's fun. It's actually better that I had a lot of it spoiled. I enjoyed it a lot. So for those of you who are assholes and spoiled it for me, thank you. You probably enhanced my experience, because I got to just see all the Easter eggs and stuff instead of, fretting. I don't think Orko's gone, by the way. I don't think Roboto's gone. It's going to be the never-ending story, because they already said they need Trollans to forge those swords. So the sword's going to broke it again. They need to bring the Trollans back. So not just Orko's going to come back. All the Trollans are going to come back. And then Andra or Duncan will rebuild Roboto. Duncan may rebuild Roboto before he dies, so his spirit lives on in Roboto, right? But that's what I say. No one's ever dead in comics, even Jason Todd. Okay, if you like this video, because I know the comments are going to be angry with people that didn't bother to listen and just like, you said this on Twitter, proving they're not worth talking to. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching.